have some problems with our feed once again, so we're just going to record the video. It won't be live. We will post this, of course, on our Facebook page there for you to see. So we got Blake and Mitchell and Daniel. They'll just get to hear this introduction twice. So hopefully it's better than the first time. But yeah, we're in the book of Lamentations. You got to love how technology works with us. We're in Lamentations 2, continuing our study through the book of Lamentations. And last Sunday we started that study that we're talking about. We quickly saw the results of Israel's sin as God responded to their disobedience. This once magnificent city, the apple of everyone's eye, as everyone was envious of the city, is now nothing more than just ruins or wasteland. One of the most difficult realities of this story is that it could have been avoided, that God has sent Jeremiah, and that's the evidence of God not wanting it to be this way. He sent Jeremiah to warn them repeatedly, but they responded with disobedience. And God had no intentions of this, but as they responded with disobedience, that their sin brought this destruction upon themselves. They don't have anyone else to blame other than themselves and other than their sins. They alone are accountable for this, and that's one of the worst parts about this, one of the most difficult realities to do this, because it all could have been avoided. Looking back at the language of chapter 1, it's hard to imagine that it could get any darker or heavier, but that's exactly what chapter 2 does, as we'll take a look in just a moment. It does this as God's response to his rebuke here, and the poetry itself is dark. The shadow or cloud that hangs over the city and the people of Jerusalem is this dark cloud, and we begin to see, as Jeremiah writes, as he sees on their faces and in their expression, we see this dark shadow or cloud is hanging over them. That his anger is not targeted towards any spot on the map, longitude or latitude. No, the anger is targeted against Jerusalem, the people, the citizens of the city. They are reaping what they sowed in disobedience to a holy God. The theme of the chapter 2 is not what they have done to themselves or doing to themselves. Now it is what God is doing to them as he works out his righteous anger. And as we see in just a moment, in the first 9 verses alone, there are over 20 verbs or action verbs there to describe the results of God's anger. In chapter 2, Jeremiah is lamenting the actions of God's righteous anger towards his people. They had provoked God's anger through their disobedience, and now God is responding. So the first thing we see here as the chapter is kind of broken down into 3 separate parts. The first being the righteous anger of God, as we've just talked about in the first 9 verses. So if you would, look at the first 9 verses. Jeremiah writes, "How the Lord in his anger has set the daughter of Zion under the cloud. He has cast down from heaven to earth the splendor of Israel. He has not remembered his footstool in the day of his anger. The Lord has swallowed up without mercy and all the inhabitants of Jacob in his wrath. He has broken down the strongholds of the daughter of Judah. He has brought down the ground in dishonor, the king and his rulers. He has cut down in fierce anger all the might of Israel, withdrawn from them his right hand in the face of an enemy. He has burned like a flaming fire in Jacob, consuming all around." Then in verse 4, "He has bent his bow like an enemy. When he has right hand set like a foe, he has killed all who delightful in his eyes. In the tent of the daughter of Zion, he has poured out his fury like fire. The Lord has become like an enemy. He has swallowed up Israel. He has swallowed up all its palaces. He has laid ruins in its strongholds. He has multiplied in the daughter of Judah mourning and lamentation. He has laid waste his booths like garden, laid ruins in his meeting places. The Lord has made Zion forget festival and Sabbath. In his fierce indignation has spurned king and priest. The Lord has scorned his altar, disowned his sanctuary. He has delivered into the hand of the enemy the walls of her palaces. They raised a clamor in the house of the Lord, and on the day of the festival, the Lord determined to lay at ruin the walls of the daughter of Zion. He stretched out his measuring line. He did not restrain his hand from destroying. He caused rampart and well to lament the languished together. And then in verse 9, her gates have sunk into the ground. He has ruined and broken her bars. Her king and princes are among the nations. The law is no more. more. The prophets find no vision from the Lord. The Lord, in his anger, has cut off the horn of Israel. This is a sign of Israel's power. In verse 4, God tells us that he has killed all who are delightful in his eyes, or in their eyes, the best things about the nation, the people and the buildings, the best things about the nation of Israel, or particularly the city of Jerusalem, are gone. They have been destroyed, and we see it in this very vivid language here in chapter 2. It is no more. It's dark. It is heavy. This poetry moves us with emotion, as we can maybe sense in a very small way of what the people must have been feeling. To go even further, God destroyed, according to verse 6, his meeting place, the temple. Like it was nothing but a shack standing in a garden or a field. He destroyed the temple. The walls, a symbol of protection, were brought down and handed over to the enemies. They did not stand a chance. Even if the people wanted to, at the very last moment, to change their minds, they were not able to, because the prophets received no visions any longer. God was done giving instructions. Jerusalem had believed that this was impossible, that nothing quite like this could ever happen to them, because they were under the hand of God's protection. But now God had removed that hand, according to Jeremiah, and now they were feeling the brunt of his righteous anger and his rebuke. They had no one else to blame but themselves, because we must remember that this was avoidable, something we must have in our mind with every verse and every sentence and line of this poetry that we read. We must remember that it was all avoidable, only them to blame. Oftentimes we have no idea why certain things happen, even especially those things, as we say, are bad things. Why do bad things happen? We simply cannot know this. It is in the mind of God. Other times we're aware of why things are happening, because it is a result of sin. Last week we looked in chapter 1, and it was very clear that they knew why this was happening to them. It was no mystery to them. No, it was because of their sin. But most of the times we cannot say with any certainty why bad things happen. We aren't Jeremiah, and we certainly are not God. And that moves us into their reaction as they are standing there, seeing this once magnificent city destroyed. They are in shock, and they are in awe of what they are seeing. And now we see their silence. Look at verse 10. The elders of the daughter-in-law, they sit on the ground in silence. They have thrown dust on their heads and put on sackcloth. The young women of Jerusalem have bowed their heads to the ground. My eyes are spent with weeping. My stomach churns. My bile is poured out on the ground because of the destruction of the daughter of my people, because infants and babies faint in the streets of the city. They cry to their mothers, "Where is bread and wine?" as they faint like wounded men in the streets of the city, as their life is poured out on their mother's bosom. What can I say for you? To what compare you, O daughter of Jerusalem? What can I liken to you, that I may comfort you, O virgin daughter of Zion? For your ruin is vast as the sea. Who can heal you? Your prophets have seen for you false and deceptive visions. They have not exposed your iniquity to restore your fortunes, and have seen for you oracles that are false and misleading. All who pass along the way clap their hands at you, and they hiss and wag their heads as the daughter of Jerusalem. Is this city that we call the perfection of beauty, the joy of all the earth? All your enemies rail against you. They hiss and they gnash their teeth. They cry and have swallowed her. As this is the day we long for, now we have it. We see it. The Lord has done that he purposed. He has carried out his word, which he commanded long ago. He has thrown down without pity. He has made the enemy rejoice over you, and exalted the might of your foes. We see there's silence here. They have no as they're in shock and awe response here. The only thing they can do is just lay there and sit there in absolute silence, speechless. I try to imagine what these people are going through as they're looking at their homes, they're looking at their lives, they're looking at their loved ones being absolutely destroyed. What they are going through, what's running through their mind. I can't even begin to understand, but in a way, in an attempt to do so, I think in a very small way to this feeling at a family. I think of this family who was sitting on or standing on their front yard, their front lawn, as they look at their house. It's burning down. Kids have no idea really what's going on. There's terror, they're scared, they're really uncertainty. They know the days ahead as everything they've owned is now gone. Their livelihood is now gone. But as they stand there, the kids have no idea what is going on, much like what's going on here in Lamentations 2. But the parents do. For time and time again, they have been warned of some kind of safety, some kind of fire hazard, yet they have ignored it. Yet they have ignored their warnings over and over and over, and now they find themselves in the middle of the night, standing, watching their house burn down. And this gives us such a small way, or a small picture of what it must have been like that day as they were looking at Jerusalem, as their enemies, that they've been handed over to their enemies, and now their city has been destroyed as a wasteland. And as the city of Jerusalem lay in devastation, Jeremiah records the reaction of silence in verse 10 as they sit there, unable to articulate what is happening before their eyes. And Jeremiah is weeping. This scene is almost too much to bear, as children crying to their mothers for food while they die in their mother's arms. Again, in order for us to really understand this picture, we must remember this all could have been avoided if only they had responded and listened to what was their warning through prophet Jeremiah, Lord, if they had responded with obedience. Anyone who reads this right here, moved with compassion, and they ask the question, how do we explain this? How do we make sense of God's actions in this first 18 verses, first 17 verses? How do we explain this? How do we make sense of this? First, we must remember that Jerusalem was unique. Jerusalem in the nation of Israel was unique and set apart. Knowing this, we must not give it into the temptation, which we do so often, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, or we just consciously make this decision. We attach these divine motives to natural or national disasters when they occur in other times to other nations. When you and I, we turn on Fox News or CNN or local news or whatever, we see something going around in the world, and we think back and say, well, God destroyed that city. That's exactly what he's doing to this time. We must remember that might actually be true, but we not fall into the temptation of always attaching these divine motives to every national or natural disaster that's going on as a judgment of sin, because we must remember we are not the nation of Israel, and no one else ever will be or is right now. They were unique. Those nations are not Israel. Our nation is not Israel. America is not Israel. Second, while we caution not to give into that temptation, we can look at Lamentations 2 and learn how we should respond to God in a moment of crisis. And this is found in the final part of the section. Look at verse 18. Jeremiah writes in 18, the heart cried out to the Lord, O wall of the daughter of Zion. Let tears stream down like a torrent day and night. Give yourself no rest, your eyes no respite. Arise, cry out in the night, and at the beginning of the night watches. Pour out your heart like water before the presence of the Lord. Lift your hands to him for the lives of your children who faint for hunger at the head of every street. Look, O Lord, and see, with whom have you dealt thus? Should women eat the fruit of their womb like children to the tender care? Should priest and prophet be killed in the sanctuary of the Lord? In the dust of the streets lie the young and the old. My young women and my young men have fallen by the sword. You have killed them in the day of your anger, slaughtering without pity. You summoned as if into a festival day. My terrors are on every side. In the day of the Lord, the day of the anger of the Lord, no one escaped or survived. Those whom I held and raised my enemy destroyed. As believers, we know that God is not an impersonal being. As though many believe he is or want to teach us that he is, God is not an impersonal being. Actually, it's quite the opposite. God is not someone who lives far off. No, he desires a very intimate, personal relationship with every single one of us as individuals. He is not someone who lives far off, takes a step back, and rules from a distance. No, that is not the God that we have. Actually, it's quite opposite. The people of Jerusalem now move from their silence, from shock and awe, to crying out to God in prayer. Ironically, in this prayer, they are suggesting that the one who's destroying them is the only one who can save them. That their enemy in this time, God being the enemy, as they watch their city and they watch their friends and their family, everything in their life destroyed, God is the enemy in this moment, and He is the only one who can bring them hope and salvation. It is a beautiful cry as we see here from the wreckage of this wasteland. Verse 18 is a powerful plea from the prophet Jeremiah for the people to find no rest until they have prayed all of this through, that they have poured themselves out completely before a holy God. He's saying, do not rest. Do not give yourself a break. Get on your hands and knees and pray about what is going on, and do not rest, do not sleep, do not think about anything else or give priority to anything else until you have done exactly that. And then he gives them some very specific things to pray about. The lives of their children. The children had no idea what was going on. Their sin didn't bring them into this. And then even further, look at verse 20 as this language jumps off the page to us. We see this cannibalistic infanticide. Are they to eat their children to survive? And then we see in 21 the death of all, young or old. They've all been put to death. Unlike some passages, this does not end optimistically, because Jeremiah tells us in verse 22 that none survived, none escaped. In those who Jeremiah, who spent time with and rose up and to pour himself into, he says, those whom I held and raised, my enemy destroyed. Those who Jeremiah knew very well. So we see the Lord's anger. We see that they absolutely could not do anything but respond in silence. And then in the end, after shock and awe had wore off, they respond in their prayer, crying out to God as an example of what you and I do in crisis. But the question we are left with is, what about now? If God is provoked with a group of people or community of believers, does He react the same way now? Does He react the same way now? Now we know God is a God who is the same today as He was yesterday and as He will be tomorrow and every tomorrow. But again, we must remember that the nation of Israel is unique. We cannot say that enough, that the nation, there's no other nation like her, nor there ever will be comparable to her. And second, we must remember that the ways of God are much higher than ours. Are much higher than ours. We are not God. We weren't created with the capacity to understand all that happens in the world. Would we ever want to know why everything happens? We do not want the answers to every question that we have. It might seem like that. It might frustrate us to the point, but we would not want that. Third, in Revelation, God specifically warned churches of the New Testament that He does react to disobedience. Read the first few chapters of the book of Revelation, and you will clearly see that God judges disobedience, and He does not tolerate it. He does not put up with it. He reacts to it. God disciplines His children. That's clear. The writer of Hebrews tells us that. What God does individually, He does also corporately to the local body of believers, the local church. Again, we do not always know why, but we know when tragedy happens, we must respond humbly. After their silence had wore off, the people of Jerusalem responded humbly as they looked around. They had no other reason. They had no pride. Everything was destroyed. They were thinking about eating their children for survival. They were humble. And whatever we are facing, we must respond the way the people of Jerusalem did. Ultimately, there will be a time of silence where we're speechless. We don't know what's going on. Then we will respond after that silence in prayer, crying out to a holy God, our only hope, our only answer for salvation. As even they see Him as an enemy there, He has become like an enemy to them, according to Jeremiah, and yet He is their only salvation, and that is the same for you and I. Though we might not face, we will never face what the nation of Israel was facing during this time or throughout the Old Testament. But though we face ourselves, our own crises, our own valleys, we cry out to holy God. And we come before Him humbly, as there's no other way to approach God. We might not always have the answers to every question, but we do know that God loves us and that His discipline, though it is not enjoyable, as the writer of Hebrews tells us, it's not enjoyable, but it is for our own benefit, and it is for our own gain. Just like we think about the saying goes, when you think about a mom or a dad with their children who have to discipline them, who have to discipline their children. You know, it's not something they look forward to, or it's not something they should look forward to, but the reason they do it is to help them in their future. To discipline them now, it's a benefit and it's a gain for them. I know as a kid, I got a lot of whoopings. I got a lot of whoopings, and you know what? There was times where I probably thought, man, I didn't deserve this, but I never got a whooping or a spanking that I did not deserve. Now, there have been times where I think I got home and Papa would say, oh, I'm just going to whoop you because I know you did something, and I don't know what it is, but you deserve it. And most of the time he was probably right. But I got a lot of discipline as a kid, and I brought it on myself, and that's exactly what the nation of Israel did tenfold. In a way that you and I can never understand. But you know what? Even today, moving from the nation of Israel into the church in the New Testament, God's discipline is not enjoyable, but it is for our gain. And then we look at the community of believers in the local church, it's the same, but even for individuals. That sentiment still applies as God disciplines us. It's not because he's an enemy with us and he hates us now, he's turned against us, he's forsaken us, and he's left us. No, he does it because he loves us. You don't care about disciplining someone you don't care about. If someone you don't love, you don't spend time disciplining them, investing in their future and helping them improve. No. You don't bring reproof to someone you don't care about. You bring reproof to someone that you love. And that's exactly what God does in his rebuke and his reproof and then the reconciliation. God does it out of love. Though it is not enjoyable, we must remember that we will never walk through what we just read in Lamentations. Our cities and things will not be destroyed in such a manner as God is our chosen. As we are the chosen people, we will not experience what they experience, but we will have our own crisis. But the way we can learn from Lamentations 2 is to remember, even when God rebukes us in our actions, because he will judge disobedience and unrighteousness. We know that God is a jealous God, and if we are getting our satisfaction or trying to get our satisfaction somewhere else, he will not tolerate it. And he will respond with rebuke. He will respond with righteous anger. Not anger in general like you and I have. We see something, we get angry. No, righteous anger, because God is righteous, God is holy, and he wants us to be that way when we respond in rebellion. His righteous anger is his response. And you and I feel that, even maybe on a much smaller scale than what we just read about. But it's still very much a reality to us, and we must learn from Lamentations 2 to respond humbly. We don't have the answer. We might look around and say, I don't know why this has happened. Maybe it was the result of our sin. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was instructive. We look at the prophet, we look at Job. Maybe it was instructive. And it's the same thing going on in our life. Sin did not bring that upon him. Maybe sin did not bring it upon us, but we must know, though we don't know the answer, we must respond humbly. And we must respond not only humbly, we must get on our hands and knees and pray to a holy God and say, Lord, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what you're trying to teach me. I don't know what you're trying to show me with my life or where you're trying to take me. Lord, but here I am. Give me everything I need. Send the Holy Spirit to provide me boldness, courage, peace, strength, whatever, discernment, whatever I need in order to stand right here until you move me somewhere else and to learn what you would have me to learn until you take me somewhere else and you put me somewhere else until you mold me in the shape that you would have me to be. Respond humbly. And that's exactly, after their shock and awe and their silence and wore out, that's exactly what Jeremiah records in the nation of Israel, the people of Jerusalem, as they've seen everything destroyed. No matter what crisis you are facing, respond humbly. Like Jeremiah said there, don't wait another second. Don't make priority anything else a priority. Don't sleep another night until you have poured yourself out like a glass of water before holy God. Taking care of any unrepented sin in your life, laying it at the foot of the cross and saying, God, I'm here. The answer is yes. Whatever the question or the command is, you are Lord, I am not. Here I am. I'll go wherever you want me to go. I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll give up whatever I need to give up. Or just show me. And I know that he'll be faithful to answer. He is time and time again. He hears the cries of his children. He heard the cries of his children in Lamentations 2. So with that in mind, I want you, I know you're watching this video after the fact. Whenever you're watching this video, if God is moving you and you're walking through a crisis, I want you, wherever you're at, living room, kitchen, whenever you're watching this, I want you to be able to respond in the way that Jeremiah told them to in Lamentations 2. And if you're there today and you say, you know what? I don't have a personal relationship with God. I don't have this relationship that you were talking about because God feels like he's a million miles away from me. He doesn't have a personal relationship with me. Well, you know, right now the Holy Spirit is giving you a chance. He's drawing you in to respond just like it is. Grace is a free gift that you and I did not deserve. But in order to take a gift, just like someone was giving you a birthday or Christmas gift, they were giving it to you, you have to take it. Well, that's what he's offering you today, is that free gift of grace, and that's what gospel is. That's what salvation, the gospel is God's working to salvation there. You have to take it. So whether you're watching this today or whether you're watching this a year from now and you're watching this video, God has pricked your heart and He's convicted your heart and He's drawing you in. You need to take it. You need to respond in that way. That's my prayer, that you will do that today. Or if you're walking through some kind of crisis, some kind of dark valley, you will respond in the way Jeremiah instructed the people of Jerusalem to do there in Lamentations 2. With that in mind, would you pray with me? Father, we thank you. We thank you for who you are. And Lord, I pray as we look at Lamentations 2 and we look at that dark, we look at that language there, that heavy language that moves us with incredible emotion as we even try to begin to understand what the nation of Israel was going through. Lord, I pray, Lord, that in our own life that we will be able to read this chapter and respond to it in the way we are called to. That Jeremiah called them and instructed them to do that we will follow Jeremiah's instructions in our own life. Lord, I pray that Lord, we respond in a timely manner, and you give us the ability to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit's moving and convicting in our life. And Lord, I pray if there's someone that's watching this video today, or whenever that day that they're watching this is, that Lord, if they are moved in this, Lord, they will cry out to you to save them. As they know that this is the only hope of salvation that we'll ever have. There's only one way to the Father, and that's through the cross. That's through Jesus, your Son. Lord, we just thank you so much for the hope that we have in you. And if there's someone watching today, let that be the day that they come to know saving faith in you, that Lord, that they experience grace and mercy, that their sins are forgiven, and that they repent of those. Lord, I pray that be the day if someone that doesn't know you is watching this. We thank you for what you're doing in our lives, even in these times of uncertainty and what seems like chaos and causes anxiety. Lord, we praise you and worship you. Lord, just lead, guide, and direct us every single day of our life, not just in our times of services on Sunday morning, but every single morning we wake up and praise you for the day you've given us. Lead us in the direction you would have us to do that day, and to be sensitive and obedient to the Spirit's movement. It's in your Son's name we pray.